If trust is directly correlated with productivity, so more trust, more productivity, then why is it that so many companies seem to behave in such a way and organize themselves in such ways as to undermine trust? Is this just short-term thinking? What's going on? If we want to dig into some of the details, we can have a look at this report from PwC. I'll link to it somewhere on the screen. PwC report that 93% of business executives agree that trust, building it and maintaining it, improves the bottom line. So everybody looks like they're going to be on side with this idea that if you can build trust, you're going to help build that bottom line. This is the international symbol for building, clearly. 94% of executives also say that they're going to face an issue or think that they're facing an issue when it comes to building trust with their stakeholders. So 94% seem to acknowledge that there is at least some work to do there. Strikingly, 86% of executives say that they highly trust their teams, but, and this is where the problems will start to set in, only 60% of their teams say that they feel highly trusted. So more than 9 out of 10 executives say that trust makes a big difference to the bottom line. But only 60% of employee teams feel like they're highly trusted. It feels like something has gone wrong. In fact, it looks like even more might have gone wrong. Again, if we look into the data that's presented by PwC, what they report is that executives think that about 90% of their customers trust the firms to deliver what they say that they're going to. In reality, only 30% of consumers in fact trust them in that sort of a way. And that's a spectacular finding, spectacular in the worst possible kind of way, I think. Indeed, when we look at the way that companies behave, it looks like some of them are deliberately self-sabotaging almost. They're taking decisions that look really straightforwardly like they're going to undermine the trust in them. Now, why would companies be doing that given all of those upsides? The problem that we're asking ourselves is, why don't executives or leaders of organizations behave better when it comes to trust building? And I think in order to understand why people might not do a little bit better in that space, we can simply look at some of the philosophical work on trust and use that to unpack maybe why building trust is a little bit harder than perhaps people sometimes give it credit for. We're going to explore 5 explanations for the fact that companies often don't seem to be able to build trust, even if trust can make so much difference to their bottom line. Because this is a YouTube channel and I want you to watch all the way through to the end, I'm going to make the 5th reason the one that I think is the most compelling. Everybody ready? Away we go. The first reason that trust building might be problematic or difficult or challenging or any of those things is that building trust takes time. So picture the scene on the first day at work as you walk in to meet your new team. You walk into the office full of vim and vigor and you want to build trust with them. What do? You walk in and you say, "Hey folks, trust me," walk out again. And that isn't going to work. That's really, really, really not going to work. I recommend you don't do anything like that unless it's for some kind of comedy skit purposes. The reason, of course, being that the building trust takes time. If you think about it for yourself, you think through the sorts of things that you would do to try and build trust in a group, you would want to be methodical and slow and careful and bring people together. And all of those things take time. Now imagine that you're some young chief executive type in the making and you want to cut and thrust your way to the corporate ladder, to the top of the corporate ladder even. You don't just want to find the ladder, you want to ascend it. The last thing that you want to be doing is taking time. You need results and you need them yesterday, seemingly, or at least very, very soon. You need agile, fast-paced responses. And those things are simply antithetical to trust building. At least if you're thinking about trust as a thing to try and build, you have to accept that building trust in those teams is going to take time. The second reason that companies might sometimes struggle to build trust is related but different, and it concerns stability. If you have a little bit of a look at some of the earlier videos that I've made in the channel, you'll see me talking about what trust is. And you'll see me there talking about the idea that trusting someone to do something is believing that you can rely upon them to do it, and then also having some reasons for thinking that they're morally invested in the right kinds of ways in the action. Go watch the other video. The point being, to trust someone to do something, you really need to think that they're reliable when it comes to doing it. Now, for you to think that they're reliable when it comes to doing it, they must have shown you or developed some kind of track record for doing that thing. So for example, if I wanted you to trust me to make a great YouTube channel all about the philosophy of trust, one of the things you'd have to do is to rely on me. And to rely on me, you'd want to see evidence that I'm capable of doing it. And so you'd go and watch the backlog of my videos and you'd think, Lord, no, Jonathan, I'm not going to trust you to do that at all. I've seen some of your earlier efforts, and that would be a perfectly fair judgment. But the point, of course, is that in corporations, in order to build trust, you're going to need stability so that people can demonstrate a track record of doing the very things that they need to be trusted to do. And of course, again, in this cutthroat, quick-paced, agile, responsive world that we sometimes feel that we're living in, having that stability and having that time really looks like it's something that we're going to struggle with. The third reason that trust building can be quite difficult is that sometimes institutional incentives, well, they really should be geared towards building trust, actually look like they incentivize individuals to do things that really might not build trust at all. So let's imagine that we're all young executive leaders. We're a couple of rungs up the corporate ladder. We've not yet made it to the top, but we're on our way. And we're individually trying to plot our way through the next stage in our career development. And we scan the role profiles of the roles above us, and we see that what people want is demonstrated effective leadership, having brought about change and growth and improvements. And so what do we do? Do we slowly and carefully look after the team, make sure that they're delivering, try and keep things ticking over, and very gradually look to try and grow that incremental improvement in the first instance, building trust and then allowing that team to take off at an incredible rate and bring all sorts of benefits? Or because we're invested in our future and we want to move through and we want to climb that corporate ladder, do we instead look to implement lots of changes really fast in the hopes that they either lead to a benefit or they happen to correlate with some external event that makes it look like the change that we brought about has led to an improvement? And of course, then you can have all of the institutional goals and aspirations that you want. Your internal structures are actually driving people towards short-termism in a way that isn't then going to help them build the trust in their teams, to generate the trust in the organisation, to go on and generate the benefits for the organisation. Okay, well, this one is a goodie. I like this one, and it's all to do with familiarity. And to explain what I mean, let's have an example. Let's consider an individual who we don't yet know called Bob. And you work with this person and you're introduced to them and you see them once and then you never see them again. You don't get to know them. You hear good things, but you don't actually ever come across them in your day-to-day sort of experiences. That's Bob 1. Now consider Bob 2 though. Bob 2 you are introduced to and you spend a good deal of time working with Bob 2. And Bob 2 demonstrates to you that he's a good sort and carries on in all the sorts of ways that you would want them to. And they deliver, you hear good things reported about them. Which one of those two are you going to trust the most, and why is it Bob 2? It's Bob 2 because you are familiar with them, you know them, and we are simply much more inclined to trust people that we know. Now, if you're an executive leader and you are a very busy person and you don't have time to talk to people in your teams, if that's you, then you're not going to have the time to spend with your teams for them to become familiar with you and to come to trust you. But if we're, again, very busy, working really hard, working for the benefit of the organisation, maybe we need to just slow down a little bit and take the time to build trust. Now, I said the fifth reason that companies might sometimes struggle, or organizations might struggle to build trust, was my favorite. Let's get to it. It is vulnerability. And building trust simply requires vulnerability. And again, to understand why this is the case, we can come back to just reflecting on what trust is. And let's do that through thinking about a really simple example. So let's say that I trust my son to pack the dishwasher. For those of you who have children, you can think for yourself just how risky a decision this is, but bear with me. If I trust my son to pack the dishwasher, then I have to make myself vulnerable to him not packing it. But if I don't make myself vulnerable to that risk, if I check up on him endlessly, if I in fact pack the dishwasher for him, I am not trusting him to do that thing. If I'm constantly monitoring my son, looking over his shoulder, he knows I'm there, he can see that I'm checking on whether or not he's put that last plate in the dishwasher, I'm not trusting him. And he's not going to feel trusted, which may be why the kitchen is a mess. But he feels trusted. Now, to be sure, some degree of monitoring and checking in, most people are going to be absolutely fine with. But think about what goes on when something really important is happening. We double down on the checking, we double down on the monitoring. And as soon as we start to do that, we're no longer making ourselves vulnerable to people not doing what we are supposed to be trusting them to do. We're not, in fact, trusting them to do those things. Of course, why are we doing that? We're doing that because we're scared to be vulnerable to them. We're uncertain to be vulnerable. We can't take the risk of trusting them. In some cases, that might work out okay, and in other cases, it won't. And judging where that line is super difficult. But I hope that you can see the tension writ large here. We want to trust people in order to grow the bottom line, in order to make for a workplace a comfortable and happy place. But we also do need to do some level of monitoring to make sure that things really are getting done. After all, we do have obligations to other stakeholders. Walking that line is really, really difficult. But every time we enact some of that monitoring, we are signaling to people in one way or another that we don't trust them. That's really, really difficult. And we need to acknowledge that and own that. But if you're a company who is in difficulty, if you're an organization that is facing challenges, the last thing you are going to feel comfortable doing is making yourself feel vulnerable. And of course, that actually might be the very thing that you need to do, certainly if you want to build trust. Now, in saying all of this, am I saying that executives and leaders should simply sit back and trust everyone to get on with things and never check up on anything? I am not. Some people don't deserve to be trusted. Some people are fundamentally untrustworthy. And as I've said, we all have obligations that extend into various different places in various different ways. At the same time, we have to acknowledge that, in a sense, every check we make, we're untrusting you, or something similar to that. But every act of monitoring that we engage in is one where we're reducing trust a little bit, or at least where we could be. Until next time, stay suitably trusting.